there may still be people wandering in, but we're going to start at, and we'll pledge allegiance to the flag as we usually do at the start of our meetings. So you can join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Welcome to the first meeting of fall 2025. And I kind of came up with this idea. We have several speakers who are going to be speaking in the next 2 months and also working on projects in the spring. I just gave away my sheet that lists who's talking about Louise Hawks next month. And it is Gail and Janice Jarose and Miss Clark, whose first name I forget, Samantha. Samantha, very good, okay. If you don't know who Louise Hawks is, you will, but actually we have her to thank for a lot of activities in Saugus. She really got people interested in the Saugus Ironworks, and in part, along with a lot of other people, but she got people interested in keeping the house in Saugus and getting the interest going into saving that property for the town. Then in November, we have Curtis White. Some of you may remember him as having worked at Saugus Ironworks for 30 years or more and retired now. He wrote a book about Pompey, the king of Saugus, who was an enslaved person, but he had been the king of Ghana before he came here. So many people knew about him and visited him in his home in Saugus. It was hard to find information about him at first, as you can somewhat imagine, but with research and archaeology, they pulled together a bit more than we would have known a few years back. So, you know, you'll be hearing a little bit more about that as time goes on. There'll be an announcement in the Advocate, at least, about each of those meetings coming up. Today's talk came about partly because of things I was reading to do with the 250th anniversary of the time between the first battle in Concord and Lexington right up to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And the more I read, the more I'd wake up in the middle of the night with bells ringing in my ears. So I hope that this doesn't happen to you unless you like it. But the more and more times there were that the importance of bells to people in past years became obvious, that almost anything you did, a bell would be involved. And many of us remember them from our childhood, as we might have heard them from school, like those 3 bells right there. Anytime the doorbell rings, it's a bell. And of course, there are famous ones as well. You know what this one is? Okay, the Liberty Bell. Yes, good. I'm glad nobody got that one wrong. Where is it? That's the right city.
Independence Hall.
Oh, I caught you. Somebody said Independence Hall, and it was there for many, many years. In 1970-something, it got moved across the street to a new building, the Liberty Bell Center. So it has its own house right now, and this is to protect it somewhat. I think there's a replica in Independence Hall now. There have also been many other replicas made and brought around the country. 50 of them, I think, one for each state. If it's really 50, it depends upon what year that was, how many states there were. But the Liberty Bell is currently in a building called the Liberty Bell Center in Independence National Historical Park. Now it's right across the street from Independence Hall. So if you are going to see the bell, it's not like you'd be across the town and you'd be in the wrong spot. Originally, Independence Hall was called the Pennsylvania State House, and it had its own steeple, and the bell was cast to go in that steeple. Almost right from the beginning, it developed that notorious crack that we can see in it, and was recast and then developed another crack because it was rung so much. Cracks in bells are very common for any bells that are in frequent use. It didn't get the name Liberty Bell until about the 1830s. And it was abolitionist activists who actually gave it that name and attached it to the freedom that they were trying to bring to the rest of the citizens of the United States at that point. There has been a significant bell in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, I should say, since the founding of the city. William Penn brought one with him and hung it in a tree. Now, we know it could not have been this bell because it would break the branch of any tree I've ever seen. This one is about 2,000 pounds. So the one he brought must have been much, much smaller. But the purpose of it was to ring loudly enough that the people in the city could hear it if they needed to be informed of something, or if they needed to gather, whether for a happy occasion or a sad occasion. This bell was installed between 1751 and 1753. They're not sure exactly what date because they had ordered it, and then there's incomplete records about where it was hung in the tower. It's been described in many uncomplimentary terms by people who were working with it and became frustrated that it got cracked several times. And they blamed the bellsmith first, the foundry. The foundry said it was damaged in shipping. The crack developed after it had been rung for hours and hours, so wear and tear, which is very often what happens after a big event. Bells will crack, not only this one. The bell metal was analyzed. Most bells have a composition that is about 75% copper and 25% tin. Some of them will have other metals. Some foundries will swear by a slightly different formula, but this one has lead in it, which doesn't seem right to most people. And I think they decided that at the last recasting of the bell, because you can't just patch a crack, it will never sound good. So you either ring it and say, we'll put up with how it sounds, or you recast it and hope that all the metal used in the recasting was the right stuff and the right proportions, and somebody used pewter, so the whole bell is not pewter, but sections of it are. That makes it not have quite the resonance. So people complained about the sound almost since the first time it was hung up, and since then they've complained. They say it's brittle and therefore likely to crack some more. That's part of the reason that it's in another building. The foundry said that it was damaged due to people's efforts to fix the cracks and rough handling and all kinds of things. You know, everybody's saying, not my fault, your fault, somebody else. But it's been moved around a bunch of times too. During the War for Independence, on September 11th, 1777, it was moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And most of the bells in Philadelphia, since this wasn't the only one, were moved out of town because the British attacked Philadelphia, occupied it for a few years, and were threatening to melt down all the bells for more ammunition and cannons and weapons in general. So this was to save it that it was moved away. 2,000 pounds, horse and carriage. Can you imagine all of that? Then when the British left Philadelphia, as the tide of the war turned a bit, the bell was brought back, but by that point, the tower itself had some damage from battles, from the ringing of the bell, 2,000 pounds swinging back and forth often the towers get damaged too. So it wasn't until 1785 that they were able to put it back into a fixed up tower that was able to support it at least. And then it stayed there for quite a while, being run now and then. Oops. What's that? All right, this is actually where I wanted to get to. There have been a lot of stamps over the years that show the Liberty Bell. This picture with the two posts on each side of it, that was needed to hold it up because it was not, when the artist drew this sketch, in Independence Hall. It was at an exposition elsewhere in Pennsylvania. So it had been brought for an anniversary. This was, I think, a 2-cent stamp, not a $2 stamp, a 2-cent stamp on the, in 1926, which was the 150th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So almost 100 years ago, this stamp was one of the first ones that came out. But there have been others that showed the Liberty Bell over the years. In fact, in 2007, this was a 41-cent stamp. It was the first forever stamp. This was the image, or a similar image of the Liberty Bell was chosen for the very first stamp that was forever. And they did that on purpose because they felt that it had so much significance to the country. Then in 1950, about, I think it was 40-something counted up, and I'm not sure why, how many states there were in 1950, but a Liberty Bell replica for each state was made. And the purpose was a drive for U.S. savings bonds. So they sent one to every state, advertised it, put it in a prominent location. Massachusetts has one that is now inside the State House. For many years it was out on a front porch, and I've seen pictures of, I don't remember being there when it was outside, but because even this replica now is getting up there in years, and it's safer to be indoors where it won't be eroded away by weather. So it's now in Doric Hall in the State House, and it's viewable 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday when people are working in the State House. It was a fund drive for U.S. savings bonds by direction of the Department of the Treasury. This sounds like a pretty expensive display, but I guess it worked. It was outside near the Bullfinch entrance for quite a few years. Now, on June 17th, 1903, both the actual Liberty Bell and a famous bell we have in Massachusetts that I don't have a picture of, or couldn't find one, and it would take me more than 2 months to find my picture because I took it probably 6 or 7 years ago. The John Brown Bell. Does anybody know what town in Massachusetts that's in? Okay, nobody knows. It is in Marlborough. It's on a little tract of land. It's currently owned by the Marlborough GAR Hall. And the reason is that the building, a firehouse, I think, that John Brown, the abolitionist, had his rebellion in just at the beginning of the Civil War period. It was there when Massachusetts 13th Mass were down in Harper's Ferry during the war, and they won the battle, and so they decided that they could take the bell back with them up to Massachusetts. Now, since then, there's a little tower built for it. It's a wonderful place. You can see it any time of day in Marlborough, downtown Marlborough, on the Common. There have been some attempts from Harper's Ferry and different groups there to have it sent back, but so far Marlborough has decided to resist them, and the bell is here. That's a pretty heavy bell. I don't think it's 2,000 pounds, though. But it was put in a wagon pulled by 4 black horses in Charlestown's Bunker Hill Day parade back in 1903. So, they moved it around. The Liberty Bell and also the John Brown Bell in separate carriages. The John Brown Bell weighs 700 to 800 pounds, which is still too much to pick up and put in your pocket, but a lot less than the Liberty Bell. Several other times it has gone on tour, but then after a while, both of these bells, people said we don't want it possibly getting damaged. Sometimes little chips would be found missing after these excursions, and not accidental. 1861, it was in Harper's Ferry in the firehouse. And since later in the year, in August of that year, it was taken, and by the end of the war, it was transported up here. It wasn't transported immediately because, again, takes a lot of resources to get something that heavy to travel that far away. There are a number of famous bells around the world. Oops. Okay. This is not the most famous. Some of you might have figured out where it is, but there's Holly behind it, so it could be lots of places. The most famous bell, perhaps, is Big Ben. And I say that, and you're saying, Big Ben, that's a clock, right? Or a tower? It's a bell. People call the clock and the tower the tower where Big Ben is, and so shorten it to Big Ben. But Big Ben is actually the name of the bell itself. It's very common in England for centuries for bells to be given a name. Often a person's name, but sometimes it's not a person's name. Sometimes it's peace or some other word that they think reminds them of the use the bell was put to. Very often it's the name of either the rector of the church at the time the bell was mounted, or someone else in the town who maybe helped lift the bell up into the tower. It's also known as the Great Bell of the Great Clock of Westminster. It's in the tower of the Palace of Westminster in London. Actually, there's more than one tower too, but this is the one on the north side and houses Big Ben, which has a very loud, as befitting a big bell, and very deep tone. The tower's name was for a long time just Clock Tower, even though when you look up Big Ben, you see a picture of the tower. And it's partly because a bell is inside the tower. You'd have to climb up there, which most photographers are not able or willing to do, to actually see the bell and take a picture of the bell. On September 12th, another date very close to today, in 2012, it was renamed from the kind of almost nameless clock tower to Elizabeth Tower in honor of Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee, because that was her 100th year. Now, Big Ben is probably named, there's not 100% agreement, but it seems to make sense to most historians. It's named for Sir Benjamin Hall, the Minister of Public Works, who was there when the bell was mounted in the tower. And that one's cracked too. It cracked in September 1859. And I don't know if they attempted to fix it. It's still got a crack, or it's got a new crack, but it's still a usable bell. Okay. This bell right here is partly a reminder of the long tradition of bells. A few weeks ago, I came out on Sunday morning and sat in front of this building in Saugus thinking, well, I'll hear the church bells and I will know which churches have bells. There's so many churches right here. What did I hear? Crickets. Yeah, no bells at all. And many towns are now without, either they don't have a working bell, or people complained that they'd have to get up too early on Sunday, or a combination of those things. Many churches don't have bells anymore. When I was in Salem on a weekday, though, for several hours sitting outside, there were bells from several directions every hour. And it was, they chime, I noticed it, I think I was there at 11:45. When noontime came, 12 chimes from one clock, another one started up a few minutes later and with a different tune, and so 3 or 4 anyway, maybe more than that, hard to count. In Great Britain, almost every city or town has a clock tower, and most of them still have bells in them, and many of them are working bells. And part of the reason is that centuries ago, there was a decree that you couldn't have a town unless it had a meeting house with a tower and a bell in it. And that was a requirement. So that's why there still are many buildings remaining all over the place, and many of them were stone, because if they were all wood, some of them would have burned down by now. Some of them have been damaged and removed. Great Britain has a very different system of ringing bells than any place else in Europe. They call it change ringing. And it's a little bit difficult thing to describe exactly. It's not a tune or a song or melody that you'd recognize usually. They can do that with some bells, but it's more of a mathematical series of rings, which can be written down like a recipe that the bell ringers can follow. And usually the churches have at least one, but sometimes a series of bells. There might be 5. A better endowed church might have 7 or 9 or 8. It isn't always odd numbers, but a certain series of bells. And so it isn't really what we'd call a tune or a melody, but it has a certain listing to it. And sometimes you can tell by the way it's rung what the news is. Or you could. If you lived in the town, you would be familiar enough with it, I think. On the European continent, it was more common to play tunes. So places like France and Spain and Belgium, that also had a lot of bells in their history, would often play hymns or carols if it was a church. They might play a patriotic song if it was the town hall or some other civic building, a school, for example. In Great Britain, when a person died who was a member of the town, the typical thing would be to toll 9 strokes. So usually, if you heard the bell start ringing and you didn't have a newspaper, you didn't have a radio because they hadn't been invented, you didn't have your cell phone, again, not invented yet, you would have an idea what had happened. If you heard 9 strokes, that neighbor who was sick must have passed away. And then after that, there would be a stroke for every year that the person had been alive. So you would also have maybe an idea of who it was. And you might say, oh, it wasn't the elderly person that we'd been thinking wasn't going to make it. It was a child. You know, you would hear some of the evidence out that. So you might know at least part of the news, and you'd know whether you'd have to run down the street and find out who knew a little bit more detail. And so the older the person was, of course, the longer the ringing would continue. If it was an infant and there was a lot of infant mortality, it might only ring a single stroke. I have a couple of books out here. Paul and I remember, we don't remember how many decades ago, but we both read The 9 Tailors by Dorothy Sayers, a murder mystery, which I'd recommend to anybody who likes really spooky murder mysteries and also finds bells interesting and British history, because it's full of all of those things. It was published in 1934, and so if you do read mysteries, you've heard of Lord Peter Wimsey. His car breaks down in this rural town, and they are competitive bell ringers. So they want to outdo another town that rang New Year's Eve for 9 hours several years before, 1868, I think it was. So they were going to do this. And of course, it takes a lot of people. They're not getting their rest that night. It's going to start at midnight. It's going to go till 9 a.m. nobody else in the town is going to get much sleep either. And then, so if one person gets sick, big problem. Luckily, Peter Wimsey has done some bell ringing, and he's willing to step in and help out. So remember I said there's 9 strokes for the death of a person? On New Year's Eve, you do 9 strokes for the death of the old year. And then you'll do 12 strokes for each month of the year, because that's how old the year was, 12 something, 12 months in this case. And then there might be chimes from the clock. Now, chimes are not necessarily bells. The definition of a chime is a cylindrical percussion instrument that might be hit by a hammer. And now bells could be having a clapper inside. My title, What's in a Bell? I was waiting for some wise guy to say, a clapper, of course. But it could be hit from a hammer from outside, or a piece of wood, or some other, something else that would make it move. Sorry. So these are not really bells, because they aren't going to make much of a sound. They do have a little jingle bell clapper in them, though. I don't know if anybody's ever had these. My Christmas tree is full of bell images, and I don't, that was accidental. I wasn't a collector of bell decorations, but I like them. So this is styrofoamy stuff, not going to make a very pretty sound. Part of the fame of individual bells was often how clear a note it would make, and they could be praised for the sound, or how far they'd carry, or how graceful they looked, or the tower they were in, or some other famous reason. But most of us picture bells as having a particular shape, like this. So as soon as you see a shape like this, you think, well, it's a bell, whatever we're going to call it. So here's another set of plastic decorations that don't really ring on my tree. Now this one, we've got a tree shape with jingle bells that do ring. So every time you almost fall over it, putting another decoration up, jingle, jingle, jingle. And next to it, behind it, is a red knitted bell that I bought at the senior center a few years back. So that makes no sound at all. It cushions any noise that you might otherwise have made. But and here's a bell at the bottom and sort of jingly bells at the top, and an Asian tradition bell assemblage. So just about every continent, maybe even in Antarctica, they've used bells, I would imagine, for calling people at a distance. Jingle bells, we'd call this. So this is not the traditional bell shape, but it is still considered a bell. And jingle bells has a not connection directly to Saugus, but many of you are probably aware that Jingle Bells was written in Medford. And what? Oh, I thought somebody said no.
Oh, I said I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
No, that's quite okay. Yeah, I'm looking for my notes about that. So Jingle Bells was written by the choir master of a church right in the center of Medford, sitting on his porch watching the sleighs go by in the winter. So it wasn't really a Christmas tune. But they were having sleigh races, and they were going up and down. And then he moved to Atlanta, where I'm sorry to say he joined the Confederate Army. But so there's a plaque in Atlanta because he lived down there for so many years. His name was James Lord Pierpont. And also there's a plaque right on the street where the church was that he was observing it, and he at least started composing it. It wasn't played in public for several years later, or at least we don't have any records of it being played in public. But it's pretty much acknowledged that he wrote it in Medford, but then played it more often or released it for people to play, wrote down the sheet music when he was in Atlanta.
It'd be kind of hard to be inspired to write something like that if it was originated in Atlanta.
Yeah, right. I mean, they didn't have hardly any time for there to be sleighs in that warmer climate. But there's all kinds of versions of bells. And this one is not a bell shape, but it has a deep, rich tone. I just saw this one a couple of weeks ago out in the woods in Shutesbury, I think is the name of the town, next to Leverett, Massachusetts. And it is part of a magical door. There are outdoor sculptures in a park that has been newly opened as a walking trail, so free to go to. And how does this bell ring? Not from a clapper inside it, but you see that big thing that looks like a stubby pencil? It's a piece of wood that's been kind of crudely carved and hanging. You take it and swing it, and it hits the bell, and it makes a noise. And it doesn't actually open the door, but we saw a family of 6 kids have the greatest fun with this, making noise over and over. It's a good thing it's deep in the woods, so it would probably be driving the neighbors absolutely crazy, because they were at it for at least 20 minutes before they got bored. And here's another view of it with somebody that was out walking with me, pushing the bell. We have lots of little bells, not just the bells that were really used to summon kids to school in Saugus that you see on the table here. This might have been a dinner bell. It might have just been a little collectible. It's kind of a little plink, plink, plink noise because it's china and not metal. So one's shaped like a bell, and the other one, the wide hoop skirt, is vaguely bell-shaped. Some of you who know me pretty well know why I have that and why I got it as a child, because you see the little cat, Christmas decoration. There you can see the clappers inside, also made of bone china. I also couldn't let you go without talking about bell-shaped flowers. A few of them, like campanula, that's the Latin word for bell. So campanula is the genus of flowers that are known as bellflowers or bluebells, even if they happen to be white or pink. There are also silver bell trees that have a bell-shaped flower, and snowbell, which also sort of a bell-shaped flower. Many churches in Massachusetts had bells that may have been replaced recently by other recordings, carillons, other devices to make sounds, or that can play tunes without you having somebody with extreme training. This bell is now on the ground in Newton, where they're replacing the tower it came from. But the bell was actually removed much earlier than that. This was 1982, because they put up chimes in the church to play the time instead of the bell, and took the bell out. So I'm not sure who Joseph Boudreau is, but they kept this in the town, outdoors, as many of them are, because it's too heavy to put anywhere else. I mean, a lot of buildings, the floor would cave in if you tried to sit the bell on it. So here's the church with its tower still under construction that it came from in Newton. And it says, First Baptist Society, this is on the bell on the ground, September 12th, 1886. Psalm 69.8, bring an offering and come into his courts. That's what's carved on that bell. So when it was up in the tower, people couldn't read that so well. Now it's on the ground where people can see it. It was made by the Robinson Bell Company, and they even carved formerly William Blake Bell Company. The Blake Bell Company in Massachusetts, in Boston, was a very famous bell company, and a lot of the bells from schools, churches, and other buildings were made by them. As the tower is being worked on, and they have construction safety equipment all the way around it, there are signs, because so many passersby want to know what's going on. And the repairs may still take a while. They were first denied insurance for fixing the bell tower. And I think it was damaged in 1923. But the tower itself dates back to the late 19th century. It's a Richardsonian Romanesque style building. But what's most known, and why people outside the church membership there are so interested in it, is it's called the America Tower, not so much after the bell, but because in 1932, Reverend Samuel Francis Smith, in 1832, he wrote the America Patriotic Song, which people sometimes know as My Country 'Tis of Thee. He was the minister of the church, and he wrote that song. And so they dedicated this tower 100 years after he wrote the song in honor of him. And it's quite an elegant and beautiful church. It's listed, the building is listed in the State Register of Historic Places, and even though their insurance company denied the money to fix the tower, they got funding from several other places. So it's underway. It has to be very sturdy, even though it's not holding that several hundred-pound bell anymore, but a lighter set of chimes. The bell was removed in 2023, and they're not saying where, but they're kept somewhere for safekeeping. And the largest bell has a diameter of 4 feet 2 inches and weighs 2,500 pounds. So they're doing the masonry reconstruction, and they're going to reinstall the 11-bell set of chimes. So this is not the bell that's sitting out in the town. It's another set of bells that are somewhat smaller, but still pretty heavy. So more signs all the way around the church. While I was there in Piccadilly Square, which is what they call this intersection in Newton Center, I noticed another bell that was quite interesting in town, and it shows other uses of bells, which some people may even remember, in firehouses. Lots of old firehouses have a tower that looks very steeple-like and had a bell. A few of them maybe still have them. But what did they use the bells for?
Calling volunteers.
People are saying calling volunteers, and that's right. The volunteer firemen, you couldn't call them on their cell phones back then, so they'd ring the bells. And people from the far corners of the city would hear it, and they'd know that this was the sequence of rings for summoning you to help fight a fire. So they would know what it was all about. And this is the fire station in Newton Center. If you look on the ground, you can see their bell sitting with its yoke on display. This one was made at the Meneely Bell Company in Troy, New York. It's one of the few bells I've just casually run across that wasn't made at the Blake Bell Company. It might be hard to read, but this bell was taken from the Lost Village Firehouse, station number 9. It rests here dedicated to all firefighters who answered the call and served the city and left us the legacy of one of the finest fire departments in the country. So where are the bells here? I can almost hear them in my head, as quiet as this is. Yeah, at a train crossing, there would always be bells. Very frantic and urgent sounding compared to a lot of the bells that we've been looking at so far. They used flags and flashing lights. The flashing lights are here too, so you can see the lights, you can hear the bells, you kind of really can't escape that something is happening that you better pay attention to, which in this case means that a train is coming. The locomotives often had bells on them originally too. Before the use of bells, very often those triangles that we might remember from first grade music class, drums would be used, sometimes horns like a ram's horn or conch shells. You could make a good sound with it. Anything that would make a lot of noise. For celebrations, if you didn't have bells, if you had bells, you'd use them, but you might also augment the noise making with firing off your muskets for Independence Day, for example, or shooting off cannons maybe without the cannonball, because you don't want to take down the town while you're doing it. Submarine bells. Often bells underwater were louder for people who were at sea, so sometimes the bells would be underneath. The one that I am most familiar with, though, it was in York Harbor, Nubble Light, sometimes called Cape Nettic Light Station, just off the shore. It has its own park in front of it. There's a little triangular bell tower there, which they used before fog horns became more frequently the way to warn people. If you couldn't see the light in the lighthouse, there'd be a sound coming out of the foghorn. And ship's bells would tell you when it was your time to get out of bed and get up and start doing your job on the ship. So they would be going off every 4 hours, I think. Is that right, Paul?
Every half hour.
Every 3.5? Okay.
Half hour.
Oh, every half hour. Even worse. Yeah, how do you get any sleep on that? Horse-drawn vehicles would often have bells on them, sleighs, like we've said. It wasn't just because that was fun and joyous, but also to warn people that something fast was coming and you better get out of the way if you were a pedestrian. By the 1870s, that's when bells became standard at the crossings of the fire department. Bells were used for games, too. I just recently was looking at something, and lots of state fairs and festivals had a game called High Striker. Competitive game. I see some people nodding, so you've heard of it. There's basically what is like a puck attached to a tower with a bell nearby. It's suspended, and you can use a hammer or mallet to hit a lever, and if you hit really hard, it will swing up high enough to make the puck hit the bell. I guess that's basically a summation, and you'd win a prize. So that's a popular game that bells were necessary. It also made a big noise, so everybody knew you hit it. Okay, jingle bells we've already talked a bit about. So I'll put that aside down here. Now we're getting into Saugus. Wherever you were, whatever town you're in, there would be bells that would be an important part of civic life. The writer of an article on bells in the Lynn Historical Society Register from 1914, who was the president of the Historical Society then, Mr. C.J.H. Woodbury, said that when he was young, he and his friends would go up to High Rock in Lynn at 9 p.m. to hear the curfew bells rung from all the churches in town. So that's another purpose. In his boyhood, everybody was supposed to be off the streets if they didn't have a purpose, like you were a policeman or a fireman, and the bells would all ring at 9 p.m., so you couldn't say you didn't hear it or you didn't know what time it was. When he was young, there were 5 churches in Lynn: the Second Universalist, the First Baptist, First Methodist, East Baptist, and St. Paul's. All had bells that would ring for that purpose. Now, this is the Roby School, but the bell is not from the Roby School. That bell is from the Meg Building, what we call now the Meg Building. Back then it was the Cliftondale School and was at one point intended to be called the Bond School. But anyway, this is the bell from there. And I kind of thought it when I looked at the Roby School and didn't see a tower, but I knew there was a tower at Cliftondale School. And then I looked at the date on the bell and I said, yep, that's the date that school was built, not the date the Roby School was built. And then I heard from someone in town that, yes, that bell is from the Cliftondale School, in fact. So, why is it sitting out on a lawn, and how does it happen to be that nobody has put it in the back of their truck before now? Once again, have you ever tried to lift the bell? Boston, Mass., 1895, Blake Bell Company, once again. And then there's a little inscription that I couldn't quite read on it. It does say Blake Bell Company. And then it says Hooper Company, which was the old name of Blake Bell Company. Very often they put the original name of the company and the current name of the company, depending on who owned it and who was funding it at that particular time. And sometimes a bell number. So 2067 hasn't happened yet if you think of it as a year. It's not a year. It's the number. So there's at least 2,067 bells that were cast in Blake Bell Company. And I can easily believe it because I've seen so many. Here's the top showing how it would have been fastened into the tower in 6 places. But the Cliftondale School might have had the biggest tower bell. Other schools around town made do with handbells. So the teacher, the principal, sometimes several teachers would have a little bell, and they would ring it when, just like the electric bells that ring at schools now, I'm sure, and that rang when I was young, to tell you, okay, it's time to go in the school now. So time to go in the door, whatever you were doing. If you're still down the street and haven't quite made it, start running. If you're out in the schoolyard playing, well, put the ball down and come into the school. So they would sound like any of these. Whoops. This one is from the Sweetser School. It's one of the smaller ones, so a little bit lighter ring. This one's from the Roby School. Wonderful sweet sound on that one. Do you want to ring your bell? Okay. And what school did this come from? This was the Roby School also. So I don't know if it was a difference, like this was the principal and this was the teachers had, or different years. But you might not be able to hear me through that, but you can hear that they all had a distinctive and different sound. And that was one of the ways that people would know, is it my school that the bell is ringing or different school? Is this something I have to pay attention to? Who else in Saugus had bells? The factories. And again, just much like the school, to tell the workers, this is the start of the shift. This is the lunch break. This is the end of this shift and the start of the next shift. All of those things were going on. So we have a few other bells. I figured I wouldn't ring all of them, but this is also the Roby School, I think. And then there was a brass bell that replaced it after that. So you can see it's much shinier. This one's the Sweetser School, or a Sweetser School bell. Okay, so I think, yeah, that's that one right there. And then we get to a few churches that have bells. This is St. John's, which is on Central Street. It's actually, can I find it? It's the last one. This has never been in St. John's Tower. If you look at the steeple, it's much narrower than, the steeple is too narrow for this bell. But they got it from St. Luke's Church and another Episcopal church in Linden Square in Malden, when that church merged with St. John's and the congregation came over here to Saugus in 2009. So it hasn't been here that long. It formerly hung in the tower of St. Luke's. The church itself had been damaged by fire and it was vacant for a little while, and then it became Malden's Triangle Training Center, which was a job placement kind of training service, and the congregation moved over to Saugus, or what was left of the congregation, because it was empty while people were deciding to do for quite a few years. So it's been now for a few decades out on the lawn of St. John's Church. And when St. John's had its garden for the food pantry, we had raised beds kind of around it, so we were working around the bell. But beautiful bell. I've never heard it sound. We never hit it with the shovel or anything like that.
Laura,
Yes.
we have a rubber mallet, and
Oh.
before service, often people will go out and make the sound as a calling of everyone to come in.
Good, okay. Because I thought I was crazy. When I was out here this Sunday, I said, I'm sure that I heard it. Maybe it was Easter, maybe it was, I'm sure I heard the bell. And they said, no, there's no bell in the steeple. Yeah. Yeah. And, and like I said, I went out on Sunday and I thought, well, maybe they're not ringing because it's summer and some churches don't do services. But thank you for clearing that up for me. Yeah. Then this bell, anybody know where that one is?
Next door.
Uh,
Not at the cemetery down here, is it?
No, it's not at the cemetery. People are guessing, but nobody's guessed the right one yet. I'm going to show you a few more pictures. The railing might give it away, but it's in Saugus Center, so it is also here. Next picture, you'll know. All of a sudden, it's all orange. So, yes.
We've seen it probably 1,000 times.
Yeah. And so that bell, I believe, was in the old tower, and now the new one, they might have chimes in it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what if anything, rings here. But it's a wonderful centerpiece with or without a gourd on the top, and it'll be surrounded by pumpkins again in a couple of weeks.
The church uses an organ now for their chimes.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
I asked them to bring it on September 17th, the
Oh,
Constitution.
yeah.
And
Oh,
they did.
oh, good. Wow. So 17th hasn't happened yet this year. This was some other year you
Yeah,
did
the
it.
last 2 years.
Oh, okay, great.
I didn't
Great.
ask them this year.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful.
What do they play? They just ring the bell.
Oh.
Yeah. Many bells, again, especially if there's only one bell, it isn't a tune. A carillon, and I'm not sure, an organ, of course, is a percussion instrument, sort of like a bell, but, it's a different shape, it's different sound. And a carillon is more like bells, but you use levers. It looks like someone playing an organ or playing a piano, but the sound is, yeah, the sounds.
Going to have the organist do it.
Oh, okay.
That's why I
So
think
yeah,
it's-
it could be a carillon. I'm not really sure. Now this bell, which is up there, up over the door, is at Saugus Ironworks. So I asked the ranger, who's the vice president of the Historical Society, what's the story with that bell? And this bell is a little over 100 years old, I think, if my calculations are right. I wouldn't trust my math, but something like that. That Wallace Nutting, who was a famous historian from New England, actually bought that bell and put it over the door as he was restoring the house. The house looked very different. If you ever go on a house tour at the Ironworks, you'll see photographs of what the house had become. It looked kind of like a salt box that was divided up into 2 or 3 different apartments. Didn't look as rustic and charming as it does now. And but he thought that the house dated to the ironworks. It was actually built a few years after it had ceased operation. So this bell was not original to the ironworks. It was not used to call the workers into dinner or to tell them their shift had changed or anything else, but it's the kind of bell people might have used to call their family to dinner. I remember it ringing for some occasion, but I don't remember what the occasion was. An event, a lecture, or something other than a regular tour. But so it is an old bell. It's just not quite as old as many people think that it might be. There it is, and it does have a clapper in it, and it can swing. Makes a wonderful bell-shaped shadow on the door around noon times at certain times of year. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, because what's today's date? Today is September 10th. And when I was in Newton looking at bells, over near the fire station, I came upon a reminder of an event that all of us will remember where we were when we heard about it. And as soon as you read the Roman numbers, 9/11. You'll remember what it is. So this is the monument that Newton has to the events of September 11th and the people from the city that died, both the New York City firefighters, all the civilians in the towers, all the first responders. And the steps going up to the monument are a timeline of when certain things happened. At 7 a.m., 3 terrorists leave the park in Newton to board American Airlines Flight 11. And then at 8:46, the planes crashed into the World Trade Center. 9:03, Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. 10:03, Flight 93 crashed in Pennsylvania. So people were, as the minutes went on, gradually realizing that it wasn't just a single event, that more things were happening. The tower collapsed at 10:28, and there were names of people from Newton who died, and there are benches, and there's the, very long-lasting, very beautiful memorial. So I thought that people would like to see that. I appreciate that everybody came here when it's hard to grasp the fact that summer is over, and to come to the first meeting of the Historical Society. I hope you will all have a few more snacks, or maybe even grab some to take home before you leave. Does anybody have any additional comments on bells? I know that there are things I didn't say. Cowbells. More cowbells.
More cowbells.
Yeah. So original cowbells were to help you find your cows when they had wandered away, but then it became a musical instrument. And you're right to point that out, because that's another bell shape that I didn't have shown up here. I guess
recently saw that episode too.
Oh,
Was it SNL or whatever?
yeah,
More
yeah.
cowbells.
Well, that was like the byword between people
funny.
for a while, when that first came out. That was good. And other livestock, sheep had bells. How else was the shepherd going to find them when they'd wandered off into the valley? The dog had them. You'd know when the dog was, where the dog was, so you could
Yeah.
follow it and try to
They
get the
used to
sheep
have
there.
too with, for bears when you're walking in the woods.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's another one that I had heard about and hadn't really thought about very much. But yeah, those are interesting purposes for bells. My husband and I often joke about a cat that I once had who, I don't remember how old I was. This is decades ago. We had a cat who went outside. He had originally been the neighbor's cat, and he was used to being outdoors. But he did like to catch birds, so we put a bell on his collar. And we would call him, and he came when called. We would hear jingle, 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 jingle. Before he was in sight, the jingling was really loud and fast, uninterrupted. As soon as he came within sight of us, jingle, jingle, and slow steps, very slow, because he knew we weren't going to shut the door and leave him without dinner. Not that we ever did, but there are stories about belling the cat and things like that. There are bells on birds' cages for the bird to play with. Almost any animal you could mention that was domesticated in any way might have bells for one reason or another. Lots of songs about bells. Now, many of them are Christmas songs, not all of them, but the Carol of the Bells that the Trans-Siberian Orchestra is so famous for doing, and then there's another orchestra in Pennsylvania that has a version. That reminds me of the Nine Tailors, because it's almost a sinister, menacing, deep-toned bell in the music, not like Silver Bells, which is kind of lighter, airier Christmas song. What?
I love that song, Silver Bells.
Yeah. And I heard the bells on Christmas Day, which was also a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And he also wrote a poem about the bells of Lynn. I have to say I'm not sure it's one of his absolute best, but it's kind of nice to know the city next door is what he was writing about at that point.
Anyway, too, for whom the bell.
Oh, yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And, you know, I have to say, it wasn't only sad occasions that bells were rung for, but people often would stop and take notice when they rang for that. Whenever we'd call my grandmother up when I was little and say, do you want to go to the North Shore Shopping Center? She'd say, oh, yes, I'll be ready with bells on.
Yeah.
So it found its way into the, you know, common language so many different ways.
Did you find any information about people that played in the bell choirs, or you see them go ringing different?
Not very much, but I think there are still bell choirs. The church I went to in Lynn had a bell choir, and I always wanted to be in it, but they rehearsed at a time when my parents couldn't drive me over. And then the bell choir played at Breakheart one Christmas time, and invited people to try out. And I think the people in my church are lucky that I didn't try out for that choir, because I just couldn't seem to get the strokes at quite the right. I mean, admittedly, it was the first time I ever tried it, so maybe you can be a bit merciful about that. But yes, there's still that. There's also change ringing clubs, including a big one at MIT here in Cambridge. They ring bells at Old North Church sometimes, and there's a couple of schools in Connecticut that have bells that they will go down and ring. They will teach you. I'm not sure if there's a charge for the lessons or regular tuition, but you can join their bell ringing club, and they're always looking for new members. In England, there are a lot of change ringing societies, and there's newsletters and a magazine even that is published every month with news about where there are ringing events of different kinds, and new techniques and new bells, and just about anything the least bit related to it you would find.
I think the church in Wakefield still, I don't know if it's a chime now that you've mentioned the difference.
Oh,
The Catholic Church in Wakefield, right across from, right at North Ave and,
St. Joseph's.
oh, okay, okay. Yeah, that might be. Like I said, in Salem, there are churches and maybe other buildings.
it does the time, so it goes.
Oh, okay, yeah, every hour, yeah.
Yeah.
The high school has a Paul Revere bell. I'm not sure if it's working right now. A lot of places have bells that aren't working, but that's from Paul Revere or his sons, from the original company. And that might be the closest one to Saugus. But that's a good point. Donna, did you
I
have?
was just gonna say, every time a bell rings, an angel gets it.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's a wonderful one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah. So,
Well, you know, it's interesting, most of us that went to school back in the day, I don't even know, but we all ran to bells. We were conditioned. The bell rang, you went home, or the bell rang, you were late, or they on to the next class. Very different type of bell, but we still all called it the bell, the bell.
right, that's right, Jackie. I think when we all heard a bell ring, we'd worry we were going to be late, and so we would go running. Yeah. Joni?
Don't forget Pavlov's dog.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, we were conditioned, and Joni, Pavlov's dog, yeah, that would do whatever he'd been trained to do. Right? That's how that went. Yes. Yeah. So. But, I'm sure at 3 this morning you'll wake up. Hopefully the bells won't be telling you that you have to run to the firehouse, but you'll think of some other connection to the bells. One last one from me. When Paul and I got married, we got married at a church in Kennebunk, Maine, that had a tower with a bell in it. And so our wedding party consisted of maid of honor, best man, 2 ushers, and a bell ringer.
Oh.
Yeah, he actually pulled the ropes and chimed the bell. Yeah.
And it was a Revere bell too.
Revere?
Yeah, Paul Revere.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a Paul Revere bell. Paul just reminded me. because his name's Paul, that's why he remembers these things. Okay.
Do you know how many bells out there by Paul Revere? Like,
I don't.
Is there a log then, like even of the blade company of like?
I don't know how many there are. It might be something that you could Google.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that reminded me, the book Ride that's under the bells right here, that tells a little bit about, he started the Bell Foundry. His father was a silversmith and goldsmith like he was, but after the Revolution, he decided he was going to add bells to the repertoire of what his company made. And people, I don't think he left records of why did he have this thought. Maybe it's just, we need more bells and it's hard to send them from England, that they sink the ships, they're so heavy. They don't sink the ships, but it might be that he figured this is an industry that we need here. It might be that we know that he rang the bells in Old North Church when he was young. And in fact, they had a contract, and a copy of it is hanging in the tower right now, from the first group that said this is how we're going to run and organize the bell ringing. And the second signature is his on that listing. So he enjoyed ringing the bells. They've also speculated maybe that's why he had a key to the tower on April 18th to put the lanterns in the tower, because he was one of the bell ringers group. So there's a lot of things that people say, you know, maybe that connection to those bells is why his company started making bells later, that he just liked them so much he wanted to add that. He sent his son to England to learn bell making, because it wasn't something that he thought they had a good grasp of already. So it was worth learning fresh, worth sending someone across the big pond to study, or to talk to at least, and interview and learn the ways that you could make the best bell. Okay, all right. Have a good rest of the evening. Please eat food.